Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks again for joining us for another edition of the Automotive Livestream Hour. It's really our pleasure to continue welcoming you here, our global audience with our global guests. This week, we're going to be talking about innovation in production and logistics, notably digital transformation and tech tools in the supply chain. Now, of course, the COVID-19 crisis has been dubbed by many to be the great accelerator of digital transformation in so many areas and facets of our lives and business, whether it's working from home and the endless stream of video calls that we all now live in, or whether it's online ordering. And of course, this has been the case for the automotive industry and notably also for the supply chain as well. And that's something we're going to spend time talking about in some detail today with my expert guests. Looking at both the transformation that clearly has been underway for some years now in terms of software optimization, in terms of algorithmic network design, in terms of visibility in the supply chain, and all the potential which wasn't invented by COVID by any stretch, but which maybe we're seeing become even more relevant as we go deeper into the crisis and recovery phase. So it's a great topic. I think it's highly relevant. I expect a lot of interesting ideas both from our guests, but also I'm hoping for many from our audience for you to share your thoughts with us in the questions and in the comments, so that we can put it to our panelists and get the discussion rolling that way. So let's kick off. I'd like to again welcome you to this week's show, and thank very much to our partners who support us for the live stream hour and our wider Festival of Transformation. Our partners now include C&W Courier Network, and a very important premium freight logistics provider operating globally in the automotive industry. A welcome to our new partner, Horizon Auto Logistics, which is a port terminal provider with more and more facilities operating in North America and elsewhere in the finished vehicle space. Finished vehicle and supply chain IT provider Proact International, our other supporter, and indeed Fract Logistics Services, another important supply chain and vehicle logistics planning IT and visibility provider. So thanks again to all of our partners, and please do you can find out more information about all of our partners on our website. Quick word about our guests today. Some of them will be familiar to you, and obviously I think it represents some great ideas, projects, and leaders in the supply chain. Our first guest will be Amlan Bose, who has an even longer job title perhaps than what I've put there. He's got a lot of responsibilities, but he plays very key roles at Ford of India in terms of supply chain, inbound, customs, and exports. But he's also VP of the Center of Excellence within Ford's International Market Group, which includes countries in Asia Pacific, Middle East, Africa, and South America, and as such is leading some very interesting digital transformation of the supply chain programs over the whole across these regions, which Amlan will share more about with us when we speak to him in a little bit. But really pleased and happy to have Amlan on the show. We'll also be joined by Bart Huthwaite, who's the principal of the automotive sector and automotive and transportation sector at EY. And again, Bart is someone who has been very deep in many technology, IT, data projects for the automotive supply chain, and Bart's going to be giving us a broader view on the tools and technology that we're seeing. Again, both relevant to the current crisis, but in both cases today, we'll obviously be looking well beyond, and in some cases before what's happening. So just a quick rundown of how we'll run the show today. I'll kick off as per usual with the roundup and some overview of the trends that we're seeing in the supply chain during the crisis and in the IT and tech space before I bring on our first guest, Amlan, and we'll have a bit of time for some slides and some questions with Amlan, and then we'll hear from Bart, and then we'll bring everyone together for Q&A. But however, throughout, please put questions, comments into the chat box. I'll raise them as soon as they are relevant, as soon as there's a moment, whether that's during a presentation or whether that's in a Q&A or panel later. please do share your thoughts as we go along. Let's just start quickly with a roundup. It's a busy slide, and I won't dwell on each piece, but every week we try to bring you some highlights of the operational changes happening kind of in the wake of the crisis with restarts. So you can see here, these are plants which have recently or will very soon restart production, some of them over the last week, some of them next week. We've had a number in the UK just this week, including Nissan, Jaguar Land Rover, and Honda, although Honda maybe had started and had would have been likely impacted by the global cyber attack, which we'll talk about a bit later, not least in the context of digital tools and transformation. We've also seen Opel open a few more plants, FCA in Poland, and then across in the US, more have turned on as well. There's also some brands which are starting to ramp up production more. BMW is expected to be on 2 shifts across Europe by the middle of June, and GM, Ford, FCA all looking to increase their truck and SUV production and increase shifts over the coming weeks and months. So there are some positive signs happening there. Mexico almost all back online from an OEM standpoint, with Volkswagen, Audi set next week. A bit more activity in Brazil, and India continuing to open, and we'll get maybe a bit more updates from Amlan on some of the information on the ground there. But it's also worth noting, be it through any number of reasons, but not all plants are reopening or necessarily staying open. In some cases early on, we knew that those were because of supply, but in just as many cases now, it seems to be hinging on where there's low demand. And so in Europe, there's quite a large number of plants from brands who either are staying at slow production or will take some pauses or extend shutdowns, and that's largely because vehicle inventories are still high enough and demand still tepid enough at this point to bring them back on. In the case of Gaso Bromwich, Jaguar Land Rover won't open again until August 10th, partly for demand and partly likely because of changes at the plant to build a new EV. And it's not just Europe where that's happening. We see that with South Korea, with Hyundai and Kia. We see it in Japan and elsewhere. So the demand picture is still weighing heavily on the stability of production. We turn to Europe. I think some of the key things emerging this week from our point of view are a bit of a clearer picture on what some of the incentives are likely to be. Germany coming out now with doubling its incentives for EVs as a way to its scrappage scheme to encourage demand. However, interestingly, it has no plans to incentivize ICE vehicles, and that may be the case in other markets too. There was some talk that it might be with the UK. That's not necessarily clear now here what will happen, but nonetheless, it's clear that most of the incentives in Europe will certainly favor electrified vehicles, and that does have implications for the supply chain. So it's a question of whether OEMs will have enough product to meet that demand in some cases. And certainly if you're asking questions about the local industry, will these incentives actually benefit the local regional supply chain? That's still a question for some brands who may not be that far along in their EV and battery investments and their plans. I mean, BMW, for example, will import the electric X3 from China. That was long decided, and it continues. We may see more of that for some brands, certainly in Europe. But nonetheless, the prospect of the EU recovery and Green Deal, so to say, targeting more sustainable vehicles and indeed logistics and supply chains is something we think it's worth paying close attention to in Europe in particular and other regions, although it's notable that this will not be the case globally. Pretty unlikely that any US cash for clunkers would target just EVs, or perhaps even especially EVs. And the other sort of global trend that we're looking carefully at is the cost reduction programs expected to come across OEMs, and in particular, we see them targeting the supply chain. Now, in many cases, that will be at the R&D level in terms of reducing platforms, sharing more components and parts across vehicles, fewer derivatives in some cases, likely saving on capital expenditure and investment so that more can be spent on new technology like EV or connectivity. Those are not new trends, but they seem likely to be accelerated coming out of this crisis, and Volkswagen, GM, Renault, Nissan are already moving or discussing that direction. PSA, FCA merger would likely bring more of the same, even allowing for the news this week that the European Commission is looking at whether the van combination there is a monopoly issue, but nonetheless, the core of that merger would lead to such savings. There's more alliances and collaborations, Volkswagen and Ford being a prominent example. And of course, the curtain is likely to fall on a number of plants, and we talked about that some last week. There seems to already been some decisions in Spain. Renault is looking closely at plants in France, but undercapacity utilization is an issue in many parts of Europe, especially, but not just Europe. And we do think that there's likely to be more plant closures as it moves along. We've been talking a lot throughout this show in the past 2 months about the many risks that both supply chain and logistics networks are facing. I won't read these all out here. Many of them are those which we talk about in detail, whether they're ocean schedules, whether they're the air freight market, whether it's the automotive rail freight network, which our guest last week talked about having been dismantled and obviously needs to be put back together to meet demand. Labor and driver issues, if you look at markets like India, and of course fundamentally still risks coming out of regions where the crisis is very much still ongoing or far from over. In fact, it's far from over anywhere, perhaps in many cases. So liquidity risks, bullwhip risks as some products emerge in shorter supply. We see that with trucks in the US. We may well see that with EVs and hybrids driven by incentives in Europe. And fundamentally, I think the supply chain remains fragile. Whether it's social unrest, whether it's weather incident, or indeed whether it's cybersecurity, as Honda seems to have faced this week with a ransomware attack, which did shut down seemingly most of its plants for a short period this week, and understand in Japan that was even impacting inspection of vehicles before going to dealers. So it does certainly, leading into our wider discussion, raise some of the questions of the risks of a highly digital and connected supply chain and production operation. Which are areas that we will have to face, but indeed the topic that we want to focus on today with our guests and indeed with you are the opportunities that are also very evident clearly across the digitalization of the supply chain. I've listed a few examples here, which we'll likely to talk about with our guests, and both examples of operational digitalizations, whether it's freight booking and contracting, strategic planning tools, visibility, the opportunities for digital twins, obviously automation of certain activities, which is key, and perhaps especially key now in this time of social distancing. But looking a bit further on as well, to using predictive data analytics more strategically in the supply chain, to introducing artificial intelligence and creating more self-driving, self-thinking supply chains. These are the sort of topics which we were already talking about before the coronavirus crisis, and we'll be interested together with our panel to discuss how this is developing in the industry and for their companies. So, just before I bring on our first guest, I want to get some opinion from you, our global audience, just to get a sense of how you think the pace of digital transformation is affected by the coronavirus crisis. So there's the question which is appearing. Oh, pardon, I hadn't pressed the right button there. Technical issues can sometimes get the best of me as well. So, which statement do you agree with most? The coronavirus crisis has so far accelerated the use of digital tools in automotive supply chains, has held back the use of digital tools in automotive supply chains, or has had no real effect either way on the use of digital tools. So it's a broad question, but if you can give us your answer, just to get a sense of what our audience is thinking. So I can see most of you have voted, but if anyone hasn't voted, just a couple of seconds more to cast your vote and let you know. Not to give a spoiler here, but it's not even close. So I think we can share the results here. because the overwhelming majority of you, and perhaps this is no surprise, but it is good to sort of confirm what we think and what we're hearing. 3/4 of you obviously think that it has accelerated the use of digital tools in supply chains, although 15% of you don't really see much of an impact, and another 10% perhaps see it even holding back, so perhaps related to investments and things of that nature. So thank you for sharing those your view on that. I would now like to invite our first speaker and guest, Amlan Bose. Amlan, as I mentioned, has a key role in the supply chain for Ford of India, and also is responsible for the Global Center of Excellence in Ford's international markets. Amlan, it's very good to see you, and welcome to the show. It's been a couple of years since we've been able to share a stage in Chennai or Delhi together, so I'm really glad we can do this now.
Thank you very much. Just really appreciate it. Is my voice okay? Video okay?
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Thank you very much for all the warm introduction, Chris. It was very well summarized of what's happening around us. I also would like to address and welcome all the participants. I can see quite a lot of participants are really showing interest in this. So good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, all are joining from. So I think this is a wonderful forum where we all kind of come in. And what I'll do, as Chris was briefly mentioning, I'll quickly focus on the digital journey in past and where are we today, and how does COVID is either accelerating it or what change it's bringing into it. And then we'll talk very briefly. I'll spend about maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes on the slides, and then maybe we'll open up for more for questions so that we can learn more through question answer, and we learn as well. Yeah. So Chris, you're okay to navigate the slides?
Yes, that you should. They are up on the screen now, so all good to go, Amlan. It's all over to you.
Good. Thank you very much. Next slide, please.
So is that the right slide, Amlan? Apologies.
Yeah, it's the right slide. Sorry, no, there was some hitch. Sorry, guys.
Okay, no
okay. So before I begin, let me briefly mention who we are, what this team that we are leading. We are, as we call it, a GCOE, Global Center of Excellence. We are based out of Chennai, India. And the direct responsibilities of my team, as you can see on the left-hand side, it's mainly inbound logistics, supply chain, component logistics mainly. And the component exports across the Ford Motor Company, and also the customs operations. And also we have substantial amount of freight efficiency, as we call it, TVM, total value management, and forward model costing for all the future launches that's going to happen globally. We belong to a critical business unit, which we call as IMG, International Market Group, which predominantly consists of Asia Pacific, plus South Africa or MEA, plus South America. So as you can see the map, all the blue colored is our geographical remit. So based out of Chennai, which is our Center of Excellence Center, we run the entire supply chain and logistics operation from there. We have a team of about 110 people there. We also have few footprints in Thailand, in Vietnam and China, and a few footprints in Brazil, Argentina, and South Africa, but it's mainly the strategy planning happens from our Chennai center. As we have been over the last few years making progress through the Center of Excellence, we are also looking into the opportunities of how we can play a role, constructive role, and bring some enterprise value in expanding our Center of Excellence into Ford of North America and Ford of Europe also, which of course are much bigger business units with much bigger profitability and much bigger and complex volume and manufacturing environment. So that's the effort we are now moving towards. The only thing which can make us do that successfully is if we go from being largely people dependent to a largely digital, and that's the journey which we have been doing for the last few years, and we are kind of hastening it now. Next slide, please. So what we have in Ford, particularly for the last 4, 5, 6 years, we have been having the whole journey in front of us, what we call as now, near, far, NNF, in short, very frequently used abbreviation in FORE. So all the functions have a kind of a strategic now, near, far. Now, which is 0 to 12 month, as you can see on the left hand side of the column. Near is 12 to 24 month period, and then far, which is more than 24 months. So 2 to 3, anything more than 2-year period. So we always have this digital footprint in front of us as to where we are today and where we are heading towards. And based on that, and this is a highly cyclical plan, we are constantly revisiting. We're globally meeting across all the business units, and we constantly keep revisiting and fine-tuning, churning out the strategies with the change of time and passage of time. So as you can see today, majority of last 2 to 3 years we have spent in getting into an automatic TMS, transport management system, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in subsequent slides. And the automatization of the transport management system has allowed us to go into a seamless KPI-driven entire logistics planning, networking, and the whole thing is in highly visualized environment. So it has allowed us to do a 3D vanning cubing of our trucks. Then it has freed us up to a great extent and made us a paperless organization. So we are now working towards e-invoicing, so that we do not have to wait for the physical paper or invoice to come to us. And so that's something which we are pushing towards, and we are working towards that. We have also deployed quite a large amount of bots which do, and now we're gradually moving towards cognitive bots. So through all of this journey, which is still in the now space, we have been able to reduce, improve the efficiency, reduce the headcounts, the actual manual physical people working on it, and been able to move the whole journey into a digital space. Having done that, we are now also further looking into the near and the far space, where we're looking to how to now we can actually further automatize the entire end-to-end supply chain, and would like to focus more on a digital control tower now that we have taken over the whole logistics planning and networking part of it. We have also partnered with JDA, and we have their JDA TMS and TBOT suite of systems, which is actually helping us to optimize the whole logistics and supply chain sitting in Chennai for all the plants and the countries that I mentioned about. I'll speak a bit more about the digitization of the ping and how the digitization of the ping and the future technology of haptic will be bringing even further change in the supply chain domain. Digital twins is something which we are keeping for the far space, and we are working towards it, of how we can add much more value into the future, particularly future launch, future expansions, entering into new markets and planning out the logistics for those markets. Next slide, please. Slightly busy slide, but I'll request you to look into the bottom portion of it. So with that now near far roadmap in front of us always, how that map has helped us. So if you see, majority of our existence in Asia Pacific, as we are showing before 2014, we had a 3PL, the logistics 3PL, who used to pretty much manage the entire inbound logistics across Asia Pacific. And then they used to also be an asset owner. As you know, 3PL is a combination of both someone who plans as well as an asset owner. And we used to enjoy quite a lot of benefits for them, but all the red font things that we have shown, we used to constantly worry about them. So there used to be high process lead time, high transit time, there were a lot of manual workarounds, and also we had huge amount of excess headcount in the whole supply chain system, be it ours or be it that of 3PL. In 2015, we moved and took a transformational leap, and we went to a 4PL model, where we brought in a partner who are nothing to do with our assets deployment. They are not into trucking, but their whole focus is basically to see how they can create a much more efficient logistics environment for us. And that's the whole focus of it. We improved quite a lot of that, as you can see by the green font points on the up, but we still continue to suffer some of the chronic issues in terms of high inventory and high manual KPIs and things like that. And it is at that point of time that we decided that we'll benefit a lot if Ford insource the whole 4PL activities and we become our own 4PL. So we needed a partner because you need an optimizer. So we looked into the market and we picked up through the bidding process and through an extensive research and discussions and looking around, we picked up JDAT and SMT model. Now that's a piece of optimizer which we have now for the last 1.5 to 2 years we are working. My team of logisticians have developed expertise on that, and we are now running our own network design planning for all these markets that we are responsible for, setting in Chennai centrally, and with a substantial reduction in freight cost, efficiencies, lead time, extremely high adherence and compliance to transit time, dock schedule, window time adherence, and also huge amount of advantages in terms of dynamism that we have brought into the whole planning process, in terms of not only quicker turnaround of trucks, but also the lead time that it takes for you to settle down and create a new network planning for a new market or a new plant or a new ODP. So that was a huge leap forward for us of insourcing the whole thing. Now, traditionally, if majority of you are from the automotive background, you know that in an automotive industry, generally we give these things to the best of the logistics, the 3PLs of the world, for the DHLs, the DSVs, the DB Shankars, the Siva Logistics, and all. They are the subject matter experts on that. It was quite a difficult task for us to convince ourselves that can we do this job or should we be doing this at all. And now that we're doing it for the last 2 years, and we have now successfully deployed this model, first starting with India, Ford of India, then Ford of Thailand, then we took it successfully to Ford of China, and then to Ford South Africa, and now we're going into Ford Brazil and Argentina. So this one tool, one optimizer, has allowed you, and because it's a cloud-based tool, it has allowed you to successfully do the centralized model, sitting in one particular office in a COE environment, Center of Excellence environment, control the entire logistics and drive efficiency on the enterprise value. We are not going to stop there. What we are now doing is that we are going to see how we can bring much more AI and ML aspects of it into our optimizer, so that we can make it much more autonomous, much more as we call it, touchless. We should be able to run the supply chain and logistics untouched by human hands. That's the idea of autonomous supply chain we have in future. Of course, continue to deploy much more advanced bots, cognitive bots which should be able to in future take decisions, and the bot should be able to then interface with the optimizer rather than my logistics engineer sitting and playing around with the optimizer. So that's our future journey. And of course, the mother of all, the blockchain, something which we continue to do experiment with some of our partners, but that's something which we feel is the real future of us logisticians, and particularly those who are in the automotive logistics space. Next slide, please. Some quick benefits that we have obtained through this digital journey, particularly the tool that has offered to us. On the top, as you can see, it's a 3D vanning. Some of you would already might be doing it, but this is something which was relatively new to us when we got the optimizer, something which we were not getting the service from our 4PL or 3PL before, is that the logistics designer who is actually designing the routes, he is actually designing it on his computer laptop screen, and it's connected to my entire bill of material. The bill of material has all the necessary details which is necessary to plan a logistics, be it weight, the part number, the dimension of the boxes, the orientation of the boxes, and then it actually in a 3D way it builds a load into a truck or in a container in front of you, and then it picks up the most optimized model and it throws it out for implementation to the transporters or to the carrier. So the 3D vanning, through 3D vanning, the cube utilization of our truck or container, which used to be a post facto thing, has now become a pre facto, because the designer is now in control of the cube utilization. So we have moved away from the after the event, create an KPI and let's all look into the KPI, how well we are performing, to designing it perfect, right, and then it's executing. So that's something which is a huge leap forward, which the optimizer has offered to us. And as you can see in the bottom, the ping, the power of the ping, as you can see, the title of the slide I have put as magic of a ping. The GPS ping, which we get from all the hundreds and thousands of trucks which is moving across all of this international markets that we are responsible for, and all the pings goes into the optimizer through the carrier, through the API connectivity, and all the carriers are connected through API between us and the JDA tool in the cloud across all these countries. And then through that, I can get numerous KPIs 24/7 live, 365 days in all of our mobile phone. So the whole logistics and supply chain for such a massive footprint of 4 plants have become so seamless that it is actually now you're no more chasing a KPI. The KPI is actually literally chasing you and begging you to look at it in your mobile. One of the best thing which we see is that it gives you a comparison between the planned route versus the green line, which is the actual route. So we can actually see that what my team has planned as using the optimizer, if the carrier is taking the exact same route or they are taking a better route. If they are taking a better route, that means I have to go back to my map and I need to redo the map, whether it can be a new highway which is opened, or new better ways, or new shorter ways. And also there is always an opportunity for me to constantly improve. It has also opened up the huge possibility of, as you call it, D-Day dynamic planning. So that means standing today morning, I can generate a fresh plan. I can release it to all my carriers. So that means I can take care of the production changes till the last night, in the night shift till yesterday, and give out the best plan, so that I do not unnecessarily send empty trucks for collecting material which is not needed. So the KPIs all, as I have said, become seamless, effortless, and they are literally chasing you rather than you chasing the KPI. Next slide, please. We saw the magic of a ping, which we are really very delighted. Now, where we are heading towards is, I feel, the haptic technology. Some of you all are already working on it, are aware of it. I feel the haptic technology, the real potential of it is yet to come. We are yet to see that. I feel, and that's what we call it, is a delight of a haptic. So as the ping from the various GPS devices or from the IoT devices and all, as it all getting accumulated into my TMS, cloud-based TMS, and it's from all across the world, and it's coming to my center of excellence in Chennai. And then those pings are actually getting converted into an haptic. And the future of our supply chain lies in us not even perhaps looking into a KPI report, but the report or the status would be coming to you through an haptic into your various wearable devices, be it your mobile, be it your smart Apple Watch or smartwatch, or of course in a conference room, in a smart board, or in a smart TV, or wherever you are. So and haptic signals, which I think the technology is yet to be exploited much more, but it's quite a lot of work is happening on that, and it can be adjusted to suit your various status. So if you really, and you can actually fix this haptic signals to suit your your various levels of authorization. So if it gets to a critical situation where a plant operations is coming to a halt, then the haptic signal actually reaches you or to your boss, for example. Whereas anything which is less critical continue to stay at your operating level to your managers and all that. So you can actually filter the haptic technology to such a way that only the filtered real exceptions reaches you or to the senior leadership, and then you know where to act and where you are now really required to kind of focus back. So this dual touch, data or dual conversion, I think will be the major breakthrough of the future, where our supply chain and logistics would be really kind of, almost kind of having a fresh look as if from what we have known in past. So it's a digitization of the touch, which is basically the data is doing, and sensitization of the data, which is basically haptic. So this is where I feel it really is a journey that we are all taking, where our real convergence on the seamless nature of the supply chain and logistics lines. Next slide, please. So how is the situation today? Very quickly, and maybe another 2 more minutes. So this is how our current logistics supply chain ecosystem look like for any one of us today. We are scattered, of course, all across because of the geographical locations. The blue heads are, say, for example, in this case, 4 heads. So we are supply chain and logisticians all across. be it in the plants, be it in the offices, center of excellence offices, be it into every supplier, so docks, be it in the airports, in the seaports. You have people, whether it's Ford people or your agency people or your contract people, it's headcount. Similarly, as indicated by the brown color head logos, they are the supplier heads or the heads which is working in your supplier, in the logistics providers, or headcount in the port or in the airports, customs, and you name it. So the nutshell of this ecosystem, as you can see, is highly people dependent, manual dependent, and then the moment it is manual, it has a time lag into it. So that means it's not autonomous. It's a draining down both on your resources, time, and overall killing the efficiency of the logistics process. Move on to the next slide. So how do we see that the future logistics supply chain model would look like, which we feel should be a fully radically automated and a self-sustaining process? So the same picture, you visualize the same picture, but now with substantially reduced headcounts everywhere, as you can see in the map. We have bots working at every end, be it at a supplier end, be it a supplier schedule, shipping dock, to customs, to airports, seaports, to any and every service providers that you touch it. Instead of we people talking, supply chain and logisticians talking, we feel that in future, the bots would be getting into a situation where the bots can talk to bots, and that would be the predominant way of communications in future. But bot at the end of the day can only do that much. A bot perhaps can't look into the trend that is happening over a period of time. So you need to rely upon big data analytics, which is constantly getting the inputs from the bots and keeping a watch on the short, now, near and far, the short-term implications and the long-term implications, and watching the trend. And that trend, the final filter of the trend, it's feeding back into my team in the center of excellence, so that you are really again getting the real filtered data, where you now really need people to look into it, where perhaps you need a strategic decision, which perhaps the bots or the machines cannot do. So this I feel is a model which will really free us up and help us to become an autonomous supply chain, bereft of human touch, and absolute, highly efficient and the seamless process. Now this can only happen when the entire ecosystem, the digitization ecosystem across all of us, involving all of us, happens. So that's where conclaves and conferences like this help us, where we can exchange ideas with each other, where we can try to expedite this whole formation of the ecosystem towards such a future. Next slide, please. I think this is the last slide. Yeah, I think that's pretty much my last slide. Chris, over to you if you want to address questions now, or you want to take it at the end.
Well, first of all, thank you, Amlan. That was really interesting and fantastic, and I can tell from the sort of floods of comments and interested questions that obviously we certainly stirred a lot of interest from our audience as well. I think what we'll do, why don't we, well, actually, hold on. Well, let's hold up that slide for just a moment whilst it's there. Before we bring on Bart, maybe we can just, maybe you can just give us a very short overview of the kind of operations on the ground, the impacts on the ground right now from the crisis for Ford and the regions you're working in India and operating, and maybe if any aspects of what you've showed us in terms of the now, in terms of the digital control towers, etc. Is it already helping you? Maybe we can just hear a little bit about that, and then we'll bring Bart on before we have the panel discussion.
See, the center of excellence journey that we have undertaken would not have been possible with the few digital steps that we have taken. It would have been an impossibility for us to sit out of Chennai and run the supply chain and logistics operations for so many physical geographical locations, and each of these locations are multiple plants. So it's the only way that we could have been successful is through the digital journey. Now, having tasted the success of digital progress so far, we feel much more hunger for much more to be done, because at every moment you're feeling that still your dependency on human effort and human judgment is still very high. And as long as that remains, issues like COVID or disruptions like this will continue to disrupt us because it is still based on a decision that someone need to take in case of a disruption. So the AI, particularly I haven't touched much, the AI and ML aspect, machine learning aspects of it, which when integrated into our optimizer and into our logistics designer, the TMS system, would be able to actually open up further opportunities of still the gaps that we are forcing today. Now, when COVID happened, the first thing which we realized is that we are all masters of knowing our supply base, but only to the extent of T1. We have no idea of T2 to Tx. Where are they? How many are they? So we were absolutely like sitting ducks. I'm sure it was the same situation for other OEMs or other companies as well. So we realized now the only way you in future, if you're thinking, oh, from tomorrow I would have information of from T1 to Tx, it's just not humanly possible unless you go digital. So more and more such innovative ideas has to be exploited, and as a result you can expand your net so that more and more of your ecosystem comes under your digital umbrella.
Well, absolutely. Well, it's really fascinating, Amlan. I think what we'll do, let's bring Bart on. Let's bring Bart on shortly so we can have some further perspective, and then we'll return to bring you back for some further panel discussion. So thanks again, Amlan, for sharing that great presentation slide with us. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Great. Just before I bring out Bart, as we're doing that, let me, hi Bart, good to see you. You beat me to it. Bart Huthwaite is Principal Advisor for Automotive and Transportation at EY. Before I hand over to Bart, I just wanted to run another quick poll because I think it will give get a sense of some of our other audience thoughts. So just whilst I have you all here, well, you could stick around, Bart, but anyway, we'll bring you right back in a moment.
Very good.
So let's have a, Amlan was just talking a bit there at the end about AI, and I thought we might get some of our audience's thoughts about the sort of future impacts that AI might have on the supply chain, which I think might be an interesting way to lead on to bringing on Bart. So the question is there before you now: what role will artificial intelligence have in automotive supply chain and logistics management? Will it radically reduce the need for human decision making? Will it somewhat reduce the need for decision making? Will it have no impact on the need for human decision making, or will it require even more decision making? So give us your vote. I can see the votes streaming in. So I'll do that, let that go for another second, and in a moment, I'm just going to make Bart be the presenter. And just another moment there, if everyone's given their vote, it's again a pretty decisive vote, perhaps unsurprisingly, but again, I think it's good to confirm assumptions. So there we go. Most of you have now voted, and I'm just going to share the results with you. So now you can see 65% actually say, oh, sorry, I had it there and it came off. 65% of you said it will somewhat reduce the need for human decision making. 26% said it would radically. Obviously, very few of you actually think it will have no impact. But it's still, I think there's an interesting questions there about what kind of skills and interaction we'll have in a more automated supply chain, not necessarily reducing all of the importance of human interaction there. So Bart, sorry to have had you and then saw you off. I would like to bring Bart on, our next panelist and guest. Bart, so really looking forward to having your view on some of the wider impacts you're seeing of digitalization across the automotive supply chain in your role in the many companies that you deal with. So I'm going to hand it over to you now. We'll let you talk through your talk track, and then we'll have some questions after that.
Thanks very much, Chris, and Amlan, thanks very much. It's a tough act to follow for sure. I'm always very impressed with what Ford is doing, but I wanted to take a step back and zoom out a little bit before we talk. So I'm going to share with you. This is our supply chain reinvention framework, and it's in an application called Mural. We've been having a lot of success with Mural, using it for everything from whiteboarding during virtual conferences to very interactive collaborative sessions, but it's also pretty effective as an immersive kind of presentation tool. We've got it broken up into kind of the case for change up here, and then looking at kind of the now, next, and beyond in terms of our view around supply chains moving from linear to network, the ecosystem era, and then what Amlan was just talking about, more of the autonomous supply chain era. But before diving into that, I just wanted to provide some background around the why are these transformations taking place. So we take a look at the mega trends at EY, and the three big ones that we've been following are the digital technologies. As we're all well aware, both in our personal and business lives, technology is impacting us in many ways and really dramatically changing our expectations. One-click Amazon is having a fundamental impact on on customers' expectations, but not only in their consumer world, starting to obviously impact their business in the B2B world as well. Globalization is another huge trend that we're absolutely following. Populism being a big topic, nationalism, of course. We had been seeing a huge trend towards urbanization. I wonder whether or not COVID may kind of slow down some of those things. But certainly the globalization and the various sub trends under that are definitely having companies rethink how they need to structure and manage their supply chains. And then obviously demographics, huge, the aging population and the movement towards more of a gig economy, big transformations taking place, also changing expectations. So some of the strategic implications that I was just talking about, it's that behavior revolution, based on different consumer experiences, that's changing business expectations and customer expectations. So seeing a lot of changes in what success looks like and what those expectations are. Obviously, the future of work technologies is having a fundamental impact on how we're going to work today and into the future. I think COVID has really opened up a lot of eyes and has a lot of folks rethinking where they need to work and how they work. Innovative communities, that's all about that, move towards urbanization, or how people live in communities, be they rural, suburban, or urban. It could also be how companies are organizing. For instance, I know one company is significantly rethinking a very large campus refresh or redesign, asking the question, do employees need to be on site on a day in and day out basis? So a lot of rethinking about how people live and how people work. Obviously, we're seeing a ton of regulation and trade conflicts, so that's going to be a very dynamic area that we're going to stay very focused on. And of course, the circular economy. It's been a long time coming, but there's definitely efforts to become more green, and that's having an impact on supply chains. As I think everybody knows, we're getting well into the Industry 4.0, or the industrial Internet of Things, and that's having a tremendous impact on the winners and losers in any given industry. We've noticed that the average lifespan of Fortune 500 company is now less than 18 years. So it's really a testament to the profound change that's taking place in many ways. Just an example of that is a look at the top market cap companies between 2001 and 2020. You'll see that there's only one common company, that's Microsoft. And you'll notice that most of the companies now with the largest market caps are technologies, with the exception of perhaps P&G, who's a heavy user of technology. All of these companies show good examples of being very consumer centric, being extremely focused on innovation, really not resting on their laurels, and really thinking beyond their current offerings and business models. So something to think about. The competition is intense. not only from within this industry, but from outside of the industry. So these are some of the dynamics that are putting unprecedented pressure on the automotive industry to really accelerate the changes they're making in their supply chains. Fundamentally, we believe to achieve unprecedented growth, we're going to need to see a much better relationship between kind of the digital and physical world. I think we all know that intuitively, and we're working very hard to get there, but it's a race. And so really trying to figure out what that optimal mix looks like and what the appropriate investments are is going to be really critical. Also, there's a ton of external pressures that we're dealing with in our industry, of course. Well known to all of us would be the global trade tensions. Of course, financial market and uncertainty is higher now than it has been in a few years. Obviously, privacy and cybersecurity dramatically increasing importance. Just ask Honda after last weekend. And I know we've all been on our operational excellence and continuous improvement journeys over the years. We've seen a lot of improvements, but I've also seen a lot of companies slide back down those improvements. So even if you are very progressive in your continuous improvement efforts, continuing to find those savings and opportunities gets more and more difficult the better that you get. So definitely seeing that. Protectionism, of course, is a big one. And I won't drain all of these, but a lot of different dynamics taking place. The gig economy. A lot of people don't necessarily want lifetime employment with a given company, and nor the companies want that either. So there's all kinds of different dynamics taking place. Obviously, the workers that we're hiring, the employees, have high expectations when it comes to digital. So we spend a lot of time helping companies transform their infrastructure and their technology, implementing ERP systems and what have you, because it's actually in some cases impacted recruiting. A young millennial coming out of college doesn't want to look at a green screen and have to learn a bunch of function keys. So obviously dramatic pressures taking place. Just a few of the industry trends that I think are also important. These are challenging times. I think the automotive industry is absolutely challenging duality of growth. The whole idea that we need to be investing in the future and evolving to that future and having a good definition of what that vision looks like. But also we need to generate cash now. We need to make money now. So juggling the now with the investments needed and the projects needed to succeed in the future is no easy act. And I know a lot of us are dealing with that, and it's got its challenges. We're also seeing a lot of focus on moving from kind of the product centricity to the consumer centricity through design thinking or human-centered design. So we're putting a lot more emphasis on that, and obviously that's important because customers' expectations are getting far more personalized, and so we need to truly have a much better understanding of what the customer expectations are and how those may differ between the segments of different customers. And then also we're given all of this dynamic change taken and what we need to do to succeed. As Amlan was talking, there's a lot of partnerships and collaboration going on out there, and that's important. A lot of experimentation taking place. Nobody has the silver bullet answer, so we're going to see a lot more collaboration, I think, between both service providers and the automotive industry, but also between players within the automotive industry. Let's identify those areas where we do need to compete, but those areas where perhaps we could collaborate to gain efficiencies for the betterment of all. So some of these trends and external influences and what have you are really having our clients think, or having us ask our clients, are you embracing the duality of growth? Do you have a good plan for how you're going to succeed and meet the market requirements today while planning your journey for the future? Is your supply chain fit for your business model? Or given the changes that are taking place in your business model, what changes need to be taken? And then this is an important one. Given your legacy, given the 18-year lifespan, what are you doing to succeed to ensure your success in that future? this is a big one I like. Is the bigger threat your own operations or your competition? I think there's, a lot of focus on working capital and wanting to save cost. And it's important that those investments in your future competitiveness aren't lost because the consequences could be material. So that's a little bit of the case for change. Now I wanted to zoom over here to what our clients are doing about it. And so historically, supply chains um, have followed the traditional plan, source, make, deliver model, where digital connectivity with customers was limited, IT systems were internally focused, and there were point-to-point interfaces. If an event occurred in the supply chain, then that communication and information flow would flow linearly from one participant to the next. We're currently witnessing a significant transition from that linear supply chain to more of a networked value chain. And these digitally networked supply chains are data-driven and can react to events and make changes in real time. So it's no longer effective enough to have that linear. We're seeing, as Amlan was speaking, that need to have more real-time connectivity with all of the partners in that network. And then, the data is shared in the cloud or directly integrated with suppliers to enable better collaboration and supply chain visibility. It's kind of back to Amlan's magic of the ping. And then a successful transition will require, fundamental changes. We have a framework to help our clients think through that. And that is our supply chain reinvention framework, which we're going to cover now. And essentially, there's 4 levels to the framework, and it's in a generally logical sequence. It starts with the end-to-end supply chain visibility and the importance of working towards that true end-to-end visibility, and making the investments to build that through advanced analytics, control tower investments, and what have you. The second layer is the strategic architecture layer, and that's all about optimizing the structure of your supply chain, be that physical warehouses or plant locations or the supply chain organization itself. I know Amlan has been working on that to get the optimal op model for Ford over the past several years. And then also really understanding what are your trade routes going to be given all of the dynamics that we previously talked about. The next one is the integrated operational excellence. This gets back to, plan, source, make, deliver, and return, including kind of the portfolio strategy. And this is really where we focus on trying to transform the operations to better align supply with demand and meet the needs or expectations of clients. And then last but not least, and in growing in importance, is the supply chain resiliency. We've spent a lot of time with clients on this in the past. It's only increased in importance more recently. We talked a bit about that tier N visibility. Everybody's very concerned about the financial health of the supply base, especially beyond tier ones. So a lot of folks are trying to gain visibility, and we can talk about that a bit more during the Q&A as well. Obviously, there's a lot of enablers that everybody's taking advantage of. Advanced analytics, AI, ML, big data, obviously, and really working towards automation. We're seeing a lot of, cobots, AGVs, things like that. But as Amlan was speaking, we're seeing a ton of value coming from RPA as well. Given where we're at in this transition from, the historical linear chain to the more ecosystem, there's a lot of need to connect disparate data sources and move information between systems. RPA has shown that that's a great asset and very low cost, very effective, and can truly help you make those baby steps towards being more synchronized and connected with the visibility without the significant IT investments. Obviously, there's a lot of global focus on global trade right now, and having the tools and technologies able to really understand the financial implications is important when it comes to global trade. And they're really thinking about how people are going to work. All this move towards our new network society, though, is really beholden on the need for very solid cybersecurity, both in OT and IT. As we get more connected, we're only going to be as strong as that weakest link. So it's not enough for OEMs to be really investing in their cybersecurity efforts. We're seeing a lot of supplier risk management programs start to take a look at monitoring their suppliers when it comes to their cyber efforts to ensure that they're protected as well. So what are some of the implications? We talked briefly about it, but it's today we're moving from that linear to a network supply chain. And that's really forcing us to revisit the players that we're working with, our suppliers, our partners, in an effort to increase that flexibility and really try to be more responsive to our customers and improve our ability to synchronize this real-time data to feed it across the enterprises where we're seeing a lot of effort. A lot of focus on operating models right now and trying to build out those new capabilities that are going to be needed in the new world, and then taking a look at what the networks need to look like moving forward. In the ecosystem era, it's really starting to realize those benefits of the end-to-end visibility across the ecosystem, really starting to hold partners accountable for their roles in that, and then really starting to work towards autonomy and starting to automate a lot of the communications and signals coming between various sites or in specific machines and what have you. So we expect to see far more real-time synchronization and real-time updates in the ecosystem era, and then ultimately moving towards the autonomous supply chain where there's less and less involvement from humans. But in this world, cybersecurity is going to be extremely important. So I think there's a long way to go on that front. There's obviously a huge recognition in the industry of its growing importance, but I don't know that I've seen the level of investment in that area as I've seen in other areas to get productivity. So all of that productivity and performance could be undermined through cybersecurity. So I think it's going to be really important. Also, we're going to be seeing a lot of, emerging technologies. 3D printing is being used today and is only growing in importance. So that's going to have a fundamental impact on what the supply chain looks like, whether or not transportation is truly needed, or if parts can be printed at the source of use, and so on and so forth. Obviously, scarce resources, both from a human capital or from a material standpoint, and a focus on sustainability and zero waste is going to have a big impact as well. So these are some of the changes or implications that we're seeing based on what we're hearing from our clients, given the external pressures, the megatrends that we're seeing, and how our clients are starting to address it. The rest of the mural, which I won't cover, kind of goes into that ecosystem era. We talk about our supply chain and intelligence in a bit more detail, integrated digital planning, what that looks like in the future, supply side optimization from a procurement standpoint. We've of course got our view on what the smart factory or the factory of the future looks like, digital fulfillment, and of course product development, which is going to play a key role in the world. At the center of all of that is the digital twin. We really believe strongly that the digital twin is going to be integral and imperative at driving a lot of the visibility that we're trying to achieve. So don't have time today to cover that material in detail, but I'd be happy to follow up with any of the participants today to talk about it in more detail. So I'll pause there, Chris, and come back to you.
Fantastic, Bart. Thanks so much for taking us through so much interesting detail within that mural. When we get back one day to doing live events, I'd like to invite one of your teams to paint that mural on the wall by hand, and so you can go through it then. But no, really, that I think that hits on a lot of the key points that we've obviously been raising, some of the things that Amlan raised, and puts it in an interesting wider context. Maybe just a kind of quick question from my side before we move into a few more audience and panel discussions. based on what you saw from Amlan in what Ford is doing specifically in the international market space there, and insourcing that 4PL function and taking, using a TMS system, does that sort of journey, obviously you talked about a lot of things they're doing, but does that journey look familiar to some extent to you? Or is there other ways that automotive providers are going about it, whether it's totally using an external provider or other mixes and stuff? How does that look from your point of view?
Yeah, I think it's interesting seeing Ford taking an internal and other OEMs pushing more and more responsibility external with partners that they trust. I think we're going to see more experimentation in this space. It could be a different model based on different key commodities or regional opportunities, right? One size may not fit all for the globe. And so I do believe we're going to see more firms taking a look at whether or not they can outperform the 4PLs and do the job better, given all of the advanced analytics and technology that's coming to bear. Others may not see that as a core competency they want to focus on and choose to invest in other areas. And that's frankly what I'm seeing, from big global players. It's not one strategy fits all. So I think we're going to continue to see that. I think we could see more movement kind of going both directions as people try to experiment and see what the performance is after a period of time. It'll be interesting to come back to Amlan in 2-3 years time and see if that's still the model they're pursuing, or if they've decided to refocus their priorities elsewhere and perhaps outsource some of that 4PL work.
Great, and I'm going to bring Amlan back on in a moment, actually, but one maybe another question just to you before I do. You talk about resilience and that becoming a topic that's obviously coming close more and more to the fore now. Is it an observation or a thought that you see perhaps shifts in future in terms of inventory holding, in terms of the balance of just-in-time sequencing, etc.? Do you anticipate that we may see some shifts in that balance, or is it more likely to be a resiliency built out of some of these tools and technologies that you described?
Yeah, I think that resiliency is a big topic right now, and I apologize we didn't cover it in too much detail. I've seen a ton of great advancements. A lot of what I've experienced came on the heels of the Great Recession, where there was a lot of financially distressed suppliers that were dramatically impacting, and in the sub tiers especially, so they were impacting multiple tier ones and actually shutting down OEMs as well. So there was an emphasis to build up some more robust supplier risk management efforts, really monitoring the on-time performance of parts, the quality of parts, the financial health of suppliers, and the capacity of the suppliers, and then of course geopolitical or anomalous events like global pandemics or weather events or what have you. So I've seen a lot of great strides in that, and I think we're going to continue to see those types of monitoring and mitigation efforts. Prior to COVID, I was having a lot of conversations with clients about expanding their supplier risk management efforts to cover more third parties. So evolving it from supplier risk to third party risk management, looking at some of the indirect suppliers in addition to the direct suppliers, and taking into account more different risk domains like cybersecurity. You're only as good as your weakest link, as we talked about, and ensuring your suppliers have a robust cybersecurity program is going to be increasingly important. Also reputational risk. There's a handful of others that we started to explore. But in reality, given the situation of where we're at and the financial distress taking place in the auto industry, I think that tier N visibility is one that's getting a lot of attention. And I don't think Amlan spoke a lot about it, but I did see it on his slide. And I do know they're making some progress in that space. I've been having some conversations. In that space, there's been a lot of advancements. I don't think there's a silver bullet yet. We're getting better visibility into the hierarchy of suppliers, who's supplying to whom. And we're also leveraging a lot of external data combined with internal performance data to get better views of where the risks might be. So that tier N visibility is bit of a holy grail, and I think there's a lot of folks, both service providers and OEMs and folks like us, that are working towards that. We have, frankly, 3 different solutions that try to solve that tier end visibility problem. So it's something that we're absolutely working on it. To address the risk, though, I think there's other things that are going to be taking place. It's going to be increased inventory levels, taking a look at dual sourcing, perhaps, and things like that. But increased inventories, given the working capital challenges, isn't going to be a layup, right? That's a big target typically when folks are looking to save money. Can they get more efficient from an inventory standpoint? The dual sourcing might be an opportunity, but there's a lot of work to be done in the resiliency space.
Absolutely. Well, that seems a good time to bring Amlan back in, actually, and we can use some of the remaining time to trade a few of the thoughts on both sides, and obviously there's a lot of questions as well. Welcome back, Amlan. I can also sort of mention that there's way too many questions that we can get through in a reasonable time, so perhaps we can also the 3 of us can reprise a bit offline and address some of the questions for our audience and put it out in a more complete way as well. So that's something just for our audience to know. We won't keep you another hour to get through them, but we'll do our best to get through them, after this as well. So Amna, maybe because there were some questions on this as well from the audience, and Bart just raised it, and you raised that tier end side, you would have been like sitting ducks, I think is what you said, had you not made some of the progress that you'd already made. In terms of the tier end side, how would you characterize your visibility of what's happening there now, be it in India or the global supply base? And what's the further steps you'd like to take and see to improve that visibility?
Well, currently, the current state is we do not have a good visibility. That's period. We are relying completely on T1 to tell us about T2. Completely on T2 to tell us about T3. That's a fact. But COVID has given us a wake-up call. So what we are doing is we have brought in our analytics team to look into and start doing a kind of entire value stream mapping of an end-to-end from the finished part number to right from the raw material. So we are mapping it globally, commodity by commodity, country by country, product by product. And we're trying to do that. So we're at a very early stage of realizing that we need to put a system or a tool like that. And analytics is helping us because it is humanly not possible to be aware of, a company of the dimension of Ford, the kind of volumes we do or the models that the complex nature of the models and all. It is not. So it's good that we have analytics, and then also in future bots and analytics, and in future the AI ML aspects of it, if that can be clubbed, I think that would really also start giving not only the data but also data with an intelligence attached to it. And that's where the resilience part would start flowing in from there, where in advance you'll start getting to know where it is happening. So that's where we are today.
Sounds like there's a beast at the door, but we'll thank you for that, Amlan. I think that obviously does reflect some of the direction others want to move as well. A couple of specific questions I wanted to just pull from the audience. One is, does Ford's current network planning platform provide the ability for network simulations, flow simulations, greenfield studies, and does it provide the opportunity to perform supplier sourcing through an RFP process? That's quite specific questions, but I wondered if you might be able to address any of those in terms of the system.
Yeah, not the last part, not the sourcing part per se, but I'll explain it. We have taken 2 modules. One is the TMS, another is TMOD, Transport Modular. The Transport Modular is nothing but a what-if scenario. So when you're launching a new product and you're getting into a new country or a new plant or a new supply-based locations, or you are trying to understand where should your hub be located in a new environment, in new footprint of supply base. In that case, the Transport Modular helps us to run the simulation studies. How it helps us in terms of
Looks like we might have a connectivity issue.
I was also gone for a second there too, Bart. So I'm glad. I'm glad one of us survived that ransomware attack that I think we've just been subject to.
Right.
We'll give Amlan a moment there to hopefully reconnect. Sorry about that. I'm not sure at what point we got disconnected, because I was also a bit disconnected there too. Obviously, we're talking about that specific system they were walking through. But whilst Amlan's getting reconnected, there were also some questions for you as well. One of them was, does resiliency mean designing in some redundancy into your supply chain?
In some cases, it may, as we were talking about, perhaps there's inventory or dual sourcing, perhaps on the tooling side that we take a look at, but it doesn't necessarily need to drive to cost. Where we've been spending a lot of our time is, what is that system that you're going to use to try to get an early warning of, a potential risk. Ford, in fact, I spent a lot of time working with Ford on their supplier risk management solution. We think it's best in class, actually, and they have a predictive model that takes a look at, on-time delivery, quality, capacity of suppliers, their financial health. So that's all good, and what you need is both the operating model to surround that, and again, Ford has a good process for escalating those decisions, reviewing their supplier risk intelligence solution on a weekly basis. A buyer can look at it on a daily basis, understand where the potential risks are, and then in the appropriate forums, escalate those risks, and they have the appropriate mitigation strategies ready off the shelf to apply. So I think we are seeing a big movement in, towards that, maturing the ability to monitor and manage risk, but also, of course, we're going to be looking at potential sourcing opportunities to mitigate risk, perhaps increase inventories in certain areas, setting up different tooling suppliers and looking at different trade flows. Actioning all of those, I don't think is going to take place immediately. I think it's more of exploring what those alternatives are and having the knowing when to pull the triggers. So understanding, having that visibility and that agility to make the decisions and make the changes necessary.
Thanks for that, and Amlan, welcome back. We both actually had a short interruption there, so it happens to the best of us, that's for sure.
Okay.
I think, oh, you're still there, right? Yes, great. So you were talking about the modules that you were taking in the system, and I'm not sure at what point if you wanted to add anything to what you were saying there.
Yeah, so the tool has the ability, and we have procured that those two models, which allows you to do series of what-if simulations, and that actually allows you to do forward model costing. So all the future launches or the future models that are going to come, we do multiple scenarios, and we give those feedbacks to purchasing and to our product development team, doing the simulation for what would be the freight like, what would be the packaging engineering like, because the distance and the packaging nature quality, if it is import from what kind of countries, depending upon the free trade and all. So all of that you can feed into the system, and the system actually is telling you, what's the right sourcing footprint should be. But as I said, we are in a position where still you need a logistician to sit behind the screen to actually make the system work. We now have to merge it with AI and ML and teach the optimizer, and that's where we are constantly working with our partner JDA to see how we can upgrade and have an AI ML enabled optimizer. That's where the real fun would be.
Absolutely. There were a few other questions about the insourcing process, Amlan. So one question was whether you took over parts of the 4PL itself in terms of staff or people, or was it the planning function that you took? And I guess related, I would sort of add, does it require, some additional resource and skills internally at Ford, obviously, to manage this? Maybe you can just give us some insight into how that has worked.
Yes. I think that by the very end, Bert touched upon that of, is that this, and you asked the question, is that the way forward of insourcing and all? And I think, yes, Bert was right, one size doesn't fit all. But in our experience, what we have realized is that when a 4PL is doing all these things, but first of all, there is a limitation to which a 4PL will run with you, and to what extent and depth they will do these analysis and all. When we insourced it and my Ford logisticians started doing it, we started there was a wow factor, because we didn't knew what we didn't knew till the tool was not with you, because the tool is like an ocean. You keep on exploiting that tool and keep on churning the jewels out of the ocean as well. So yes, we have to recruit people from outside. So we have taken over the planning part of it and the operationalizing part of it. We have actually literally packed their bag and sent them back home in all these countries. But we have managed with 50% of the headcount that they were doing. It's just because when it is full, you're so focused onto it, and you're so fully focused into how you can improve your, the efficiency of the whole end-to-end supply chain. So we are doing it with much lesser headcount, much more efficiently, lesser cost, and most importantly is that the knowledge and the wisdom and the intelligence is coming back within the four walls of Ford Motor Company, and that is, priceless. Today, I have a team of 9 or 10 logisticians who are masters of this game using these optimizers and the simulator, running it seamlessly for all these countries, which would have been unthinkable for us 3-4 years ago when a 4PL was a master of it all. So that's phenomenal. And as a result, we are now, having a very positive discussions with Ford North America and Europe also, that, hey, if you guys can succeed so well there in such a complex environment, you have infrastructure problem, Asia Pacific largely and all that, then how much your optimizer can do good to us in the very, very mature markets of the US and Europe. So that's where, so the knowledge gain is phenomenal.
And that indeed was the follow-up question, and indeed there's been quite a few questions from the audience of this regard, whether that is a plan or an option or an opportunity to bring to Europe and North America as well.
Yes, yeah, that's a very, very natural offshoot we're doing. I think the leadership in Detroit has been a little iffy about it, because we are so, for ages, a company like Ford Motor Company, we always have partners, we always have 4PL. You don't do that. We are making, well, we are good in making good quality cars. We don't do logistics. We always subcontract logistics. So to get them paradigm shift, to let them. So after seeing, and it has been a very difficult discussion. I remember when we were making this strategic presentation to our Detroit leadership, and it took almost 6 months of consistent, persistent effort to convince them to please allow us to do our own 4PL. The deck finally, which got approved, is the 98th version of the deck that we're 98th version. So that amount of churning, questioning, looking at it from a fresh angle and all, just to convince that we are good enough to do it ourselves. All we need is to give us a smart tool. We have smart people here and we can do it. Now that we have done it successfully, now we're getting invites from US and all. Hey, can you look into ours? How much efficiency and waste elimination you can do from our end-to-end supply chain? So that's very interesting.
It is indeed, and of course, Ford has long-established LLP relationships and models in Europe and North America. So obviously, such a changes wouldn't come easy or lightly, but obviously signal for some potential shifts, I guess, in terms of how some of these partnerships could work in future. Maybe just a last point, and then I want to bring in ask maybe a last question before we wrap up. I realize we're going a bit over time, but obviously there's a lot of stuff to kind of go through here. Just on Ford in India, because there's obviously the partnership, moving towards the partnership with Mahindra in India. Will that play a role in how this optimizer and system is worked? Is that not yet decided yet? Can you give us any insight into that?
Well, the partnership with Ford and Mahindra, the partnership with Ford and Mahindra has been such, which has been written down in such a way which has to create win-wins for both. So we are taking the best and the might of Mahindra's SUV. They are the SUV producer of India, right? And Ford's systems and the global presence, global market, whereas Mahindra being a very today an India-centric OEM with global ambitions, of course. So we kind of bring win-win. So I think one of the very underlying promise of this joint venture is that we will not do anything which immediately disrupts both the organizations, but we'll pick up from each other's strength points. So when we are doing these kind of discussions, they are also very amazed at what Ford is doing in the whole supply chain logistics space. So we, if anything, we feel, and the final link is still being dried, it's still being done, and the final approvals are still kind of working out. We are maybe a couple of months away from the actual formation. So we are actually looking forward to a partnership between us and Mahindra Logistics future, and then we are looking of really expanding, because this model that we are using, this tool that we have got, and after having tasted the success, we feel that the scalability of this tool is huge, and it is really easy and seamless. So it's not only you can scale it within the Ford markets, North America, Europe, and all of Asia Pacific that we have already done, but also within organizations in a joint venture system like this. So it's a huge opportunity for us to further explore the tool.
Thank you for that, Amlan. So yeah, maybe a last point to start to think about. So one of the areas I think you raised at Bart has come up is obviously data analytics, and I think I said in the beginning, you know, when do we move from the sort of prescriptive to the predictive in analytics? And I thought, given I think you've worked with a number of companies in areas like this, Bart. I mean, are we seeing that start to happen, or are we still in a sort of data frenzy in terms of there's a lot of data, but are we actually able at this point to use it in a more predictive way? Not necessarily to avoid a COVID-19, that would be very nice, wouldn't it? But nonetheless to deal with the sorts of crises we're facing.
Well, there's
well,
no.
We have.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. The question is for Bert. I'm misunderstood it.
We'll start with Bart, and then I did want to talk to you about it, Amlan, because clearly Ford has a data analytics division, which
Absolutely.
I think, yeah. So, but maybe start with Bart on that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of companies are starting to invest in their internal data and analytics organizations. Some are a lot farther along than others based on what I've seen. Some of the traps that I've seen initially is there was a lot of growth and proliferation of these organizations really bringing in large numbers of data scientists and really setting them free almost to try to go and solve the business problems. And what I saw was a proliferation of dashboards, hundreds, thousands at companies that were never consumed, that the business didn't value, and that was not generating a strong return on analytical investment. And so I think a lot of those early days are kind of winding down, and folks are really understanding the importance to spend perhaps a bit more time going problem seeking than problem solving, and really working closely with the business to understand the problems that need to be solved. Maybe the data and analytics groups have the better way on how to solve them, but they need the in-depth understanding of what the business problem is. Because I just saw a lot of non-value activity coming out of some of those earlier organizations, which I think is evolving in a positive way. Data is a huge issue that we're still seeing. A lot of OEMs are still, and suppliers are still operating on legacy systems. Getting that data clean and hygiened and in a central place to use is not an easy task. There's a lot of investments going into data warehouses on-prem or going to the cloud. So there's a lot of different tacks being taken, but I think what we're seeing is more focused energy on truly trying to answer the critical business problems and really moving from that descriptive analytics to that predictive and ultimately to that prescriptive analytics.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Bart. And actually, thank you for clarifying the actual terminology, which I think I misused.
No worries.
Amlan, Ford has an important data analytics division, indeed, and I think some of it is even partly in India. How have you seen the evolution of using analytics more strategically, specifically in MP&L and supply chain?
Well, so that's right. Ford has taken a very early initiative of forming its own analytics department. So we are about 300 strong analytics team, and they're sitting in Chennai, and they take care of the whole world's analytical projects and things like that. So now what we have done, so the point which Bert was making is that if you just bring in too much of data, but why they fail to make a sense for you and why they go waste is because you're still treating the data analytics as someone who is your neighbor, is your next door neighbor. You're still not treating him as someone who is embedded as part of your team. And as a result, he keeps doing his job because he's a data scientist. He keeps throwing at it, and you have not yet embraced him. But we have what we call as an embedded data analytics. So in my logistics team, I have a guy who is a data scientist embedded into my team. So he's part and parcel of my daily morning meetings or a problem statement. He is living, breathing with me in my own house, not in my neighbor's house. So he then looks into it, and then he comes with the solution in a meeting saying that I saw you guys doing this report through this way. I can do it in a much faster way with better analytics and all. And the other fact is that the organizations will gradually, through success stories, we have realized that data is gold only when that data is telling you an intelligent story. Data per se is an information, and even an information is no good unless it's telling you an intelligent story out of it. For converting data into an intelligent story or an intelligent trend, you need the data analytics guy. Without that, we were all in the Excel generation, and Excel sheet doesn't tell you an intelligent data. It just manipulates the data and informs you. So we are really making huge progress today, and a huge paradigm shift is happening ever since the data analytics guys have started sitting on us. I'll give you an example. We have ocean liners. We do a global bid, right? I mean, we 150,000 containers annually we move, import and export and all that. So when we do a global bid, our bid file goes into 2,000, 3,000 line items. Imagine so many origin, destination, ports, 20 feet, 40 feet, and then so many liners. Now we all used to manage that with Excel sheet when the data is finally, RFQ data is to come. Today we give that data to analytics team, and then we compare that what would have been our decision to pick up the right liners for the right route and the right optimized origin and destination port, and what the analytics team are telling us. We are further saving millions of dollars because of their analytics intelligence, which we were failing to see. So you have to embrace the analytics guys and make them embedded into your team, and then you'll see the magic.
Fully agree.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, listen, we've covered a lot of interesting ground. There's a lot more that we could, and there's more that our audience is asking for. So again, we'll sort something out separately to go through more of that, so we can give more of that. But let's do some quick closing thoughts. Try sometimes in a time of crisis to think a little positively. Starting with you, Bart. What's a change that you're seeing in the supply chain in the midst of this crisis that you hope will stick? Something we definitely want to bring out of the crisis into the next phase, and it'll be the same question for you, Amlan, to close with.
Sure. It's perhaps a bit more broad than supply chain, but I really think we're going to see some fundamental, and it's a simple thought, but we're going to see some fundamental changes in the way that we're working through the video platforms, the collaboration platforms, the technology that we now have access to. This is going to be a game changer. It's folks like us have been carrying a computer bag and moving around and taking conference calls from wherever we are, whenever, and we're quite used to it. But there's a whole host of other folks that have been going to their campus on a daily basis and haven't really worked like they have been working over the past 3 to 4 months. And so I think that's going to have a fundamental change. I think the technologies that we're putting in place now are going to enable that even more. So I think we're going to see, it'll return. People will go back to campuses and universities and so on, but I think we're going to see some more fundamental changes. I think a lot of folks have gotten comfortable working this way. Instead of huge campus transformation efforts, it's going to be, well, maybe folks should be able to work at home for 3 days a week or something to that effect. So I think that could have ultimately potentially a positive impact on our work-life balance. We'll wait and see if that actually comes to fruition, but that's certainly one. I think a lot of this collaboration towards end-to-end visibility is obviously another huge one as well.
Great, thanks for that. Amlan, any closing thoughts about positive change you hope to see stick?
Yeah, I think I think you're in the beginning you were mentioning COVID is a great accelerator, which is true, but I feel also COVID is a great equalizer. It has brought all of us in the same platform as if, and telling guys, if we don't come collaborate together. So what benefit I think post-COVID we are seeing is there is an urgency to create the ecosystem all around us. There is a recognition that we alone cannot do. So there will be a lot of, Bert was mentioning, collaborations, joining of hands, so that at the end of the day, the technology wins, and technology frees you up, right? Just like data frees you up, the technology frees you up from your own biased thought processes, or it brings a paradigm shift in the way. So I think the future way is much more collaboration, wider ecosystem, and the right use of the human potential. I feel today I think we are realizing that we're wasting a lot of human potential into jobs which perhaps can be easily taken over by a smart tool or a smart machine, and these human potentials can be put into much more value-added activities. And remember, we have never spoken about blockchain in this whole discussion. Blockchain coupled with quantum computing, I think that's a whole universe by itself, which I'm sure we'll be talking more in future. So we need to put our potential and resources into that, because that will free us completely, and the logistics of tomorrow will be very different with blockchain.
I'd love to join you for that conversation.
I feel it's very positive.
Yeah, we're bullish on blockchain as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, yeah, and the blockchain was the word of the year, well, certainly for supply chain in 2018 or 19, before COVID came along and became the word for everything. But absolutely, and actually we had some comments in from the audience wondering exactly more about blockchain. So I think that's something let's talk about a little bit more in a follow-up session. I want to thank both of you for all of this input, which has really been great. I think fantastic insight, fascinating journey that Ford is on. Bart giving us that sense of where the overall supply chain and industry is moving at this time of crisis, but well beyond. These are trends that really incorporate and transcend the moment that we're living in. So I really want to thank both of you for all of that input. Really looking forward to following up and answering some more of our audience questions. So thanks again to both of you.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And I was seeing the number of attendees. It's quite a lot of participation. I would really like to go through all the questions if you can forward us.
Absolutely.
Not sure whether we're able to answer everything, but just to get the questions from such a large attentive audience itself will be a great revealing fact for us.
Absolutely, that's definitely what we'll do, and there's a lot of them. So yeah, we'll do something with that. So that's great again. So looking forward to that follow-up. Thanks again to both of you. Thanks again to our audience, firstly, as well, because we had upwards of 360 or 70 people here at points of the session. A lot of you stuck around even up till now. Understandably, some have signed off and can check out the rest later. This has obviously been a long session, but I think it was worth it for the input, and we'll share that. Thanks as well to our partners. As I mentioned in the beginning, we do this in partnership with a support from ProAct International, Fract Logistics Solutions, C&W Courier Network, and Hall Horizon Auto Logistics. Thanks again to them. Again, I really emphasize to our audience to check out their services and offerings specifically to the supply chain, which is very relevant to this audience. So you can find out more about that from our website and indeed theirs. Continue to stay with us as we go on our own journey here of transformation. We're coming at you every week with insights and guests and our thoughts, and we're going to do more of that next week, looking a bit more specifically at some trends in Europe, and then we'll be talking at the end of the month on our update, but that's going to be focused especially on leadership. Sort of leadership in a crisis. So there's a lot of interesting content coming your way just on these live streams, but not just. We have podcasts coming online. We have digital editions. This session on tech will also be part of a digital edition looking specifically at technology solutions in the supply chain, which our editorial team is very keen to speak to you about. So please get in touch with us. We'll be in touch with you. This is again, please contact us specifically around the live stream, but indeed all of our teams at Automotive Logistics, Finished Vehicle Logistics, Automotive Manufacturing Solutions, very engaged with these sorts of topics and discussions. So please do stay in touch, share your ideas and thoughts. Thanks again for all of your time today. Hope you've enjoyed the show. Please stay safe, and we'll see you next week. Bye now.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. We appreciate it.